This week's political figure episode, we've got a guy who can give a first-hand account about the time Moses parted the Red Sea, Steny Hoyer. And that is his real name on his birth certificate. Steny, S-T-E-N-Y. Paleontologists believe that Steny Hamilton Hoyer, or scientifically known as the Stenosaurus, was born at the end of the Jurassic period around June 14th, 1939. He was born in what is modern-day New York City, but grew up in Mitchellville, Maryland. He graduated from Suitland High School, I think, in Maryland, before going on to University of Maryland College Park, where he did not have a great start. His first few semesters, he was sporting a 2.0 GPA, if you were to round up. But the Stenosaurus was a quick and adaptive learner and would go on to graduate magna cum laude before going to get his Juris Doctor at Georgetown. While in school, Steny got into politics by being a staffer for U.S. Senator Daniel Brewster. Fun fact, at the same time, another living fossil, Nancy Pelosi, was also on Daniel Brewster's staff. I guess Daniel Brewster's staff is the secret to a long life. Nah, I'll leave it. In 1966, Hoyer ran for Maryland State Senate and won, and in 1975, he became the youngest ever president of the Maryland State Senate. In 1978, Hoyer ran for lieutenant governor of Maryland and lost, but was appointed to the Maryland Board of Higher Education later that year. And in 1980, which was an election year, a bad one, the one that put us on the bad timeline, U.S. Representative for Maryland's 5th, Gladys Spellman, fell into a coma, and then she proceeded to win her re-election. Then after a few pokes with a stick, they realized that a comatose person wasn't going to be able to do congressperson stuff. Senate stuff, maybe. I mean, scientists have been running some experiments with people like Mitch McConnell and Dianne Feinstein, and there is evidence to suggest you can weekend at Bernie's your way through the Senate. But Congress apparently requires slightly more consciousness than comatose. Not much, but a little bit. So in 1981, they held a special election to fill Maryland's 5th, and Steny decided to run for it. He won an incredibly crowded Democratic primary by 1,600 votes, and then defeated a much better-funded Republican challenger in the special election. Those victories ended up earning him the nickname Wonder Boy. He was 42 at the time, which seems very solidly middle-aged to me, but okay. Then in the 1982 election, he just absolutely slaughtered it with 80% of the vote. And he's like, I like it here. And he never left. He's still there right now in the same district, in the same seat, over 4 decades later. In that time, he has become one of the most senior members, literally and figuratively, in the House of Representatives. And you got people like Chuck Grassley, who personally witnessed the Big Bang and is somehow hanging on. I think Nancy Pelosi's got him by a year or two. But he's up there, and despite that, and despite having held all kinds of power positions, like House Minority Whip and House Majority Leader, he still somehow seems like he's managed to fly under the radar for 40 years. Like, you've heard of Nancy Pelosi, but how many of you have heard of Steny Hoyer before this video? And with that tenure and anonymity, he's kind of become like the perfect corporate Democrat build-a-bot. Kind of like the Stepford wife of the DNC. Like, he will always toe the party line, but when it comes to his actions, he'll do whatever he needs to do to make sure that Overton window keeps that lean to the right as not to piss off the donors, which is probably why he's the Democratic darling when it comes to fundraising. Like, he's had a long history of being pro-choice, and he's voted pro-choice, and he's all about the pro-choice life until it comes to supporting a pro-choice progressive over a corporate Dem who happens to be anti-choice. Which is what he did last year in the Democratic primary for Texas's 28th, backing Henry Cuellar, who is an anti-abortion, anti-immigration, anti-marijuana legalization Republican with a D in front of his name, even though there was a pro-choice, pro-immigration reform progressive running against him. Steny initially supported the Iraq War when that was the cool thing to do, and then when it wasn't so popular anymore, he said he was in favor of responsible redeployment, whatever the fuck that means, then continued to vote to fund the war with absolutely no restrictions, deadlines, or exit strategies indefinitely. Hoyer said that he did not support immunity for telecommunication companies helping the government spy on us unconstitutionally, back in the Snowden and Patriot Act days. And then he turned around and helped negotiate a bill that would give them immunity for helping the government violate our constitutional rights. Turns out the Constitution doesn't seem to have quite the lobby of the telecommunications companies. He's an Israel simp if there ever was one, having received gobs and gobs of money from AIPAC. It's no surprise that he couldn't even hold the party line when Donald Trump said he wanted to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. He was a big supporter of that and has obviously been a big supporter of making sure that Israel has everything they need to continue their genocidal rampage through Palestine. Basically, his entire career just seems to be being a corporate shill wherever it's convenient. And credit where it's due, he has certainly voted for a lot of things that I support and I think are good things, but he only seems to do it when there's no repercussions. In addition to always seeming to vote whichever way the lobby leans, he's basically admitted to going out of his way to undermine candidates who haven't sold their soul to Wall Street yet. He and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee he works with has been repeatedly criticized for undermining progressive candidates in favor of party favorites. Going as far as being recorded telling a progressive progressive primary candidate for Colorado's 6th, Levi Tillman, that he should drop out of the race. When confronted about it, he didn't even really deny it. He's like, yeah, we pretty much pick the candidates that we want. But hey, it's another election year and not all hope is lost. In fact, I did this episode on him today because yesterday's guest that we had on the Let the Meat Toast podcast was Andrea Crooms. Crooms is a progressive Xennial with an X who years ago when she met Steny told him that she was going to take his job one day, and this year she wants to make good on that promise. She is currently primarying him for Maryland's 5th. She's a great candidate. She was a great guest on our show. So check that out. You can listen to the Let the Meat Toast podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or watch it in video form on the tube under my channel at Off Wagon. So if you're in Maryland's 5th, please vote for her in the primary. If you're not, I still think she's worth supporting. And maybe this year you can help her bring down the average age of Congress by 1% or 2%.